time opening. We have an eye, part of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Anatomy of a Movie. It's quite a tongue twister only for me. I am your host, Phil Svitek, joined alongside Dimitri Panos.
Hello, everybody.
And Sarah Stratton.
Hi, everybody. Guess what? It's Phil's birthday weekend. So everyone say, happy birthday, Phil.
Sweet happy birthday.
Glad you've dated this podcast. And of course, in the booth, we have Marissa Serafini.
Hello, everyone.
And John Comerford is not here with us today. And of course, the big question on your minds, although I don't know why since you've downloaded it, is what movie are we talking about? Of course, Ender's Game.
Woohoo!
Ender's Game. It's
not
just
The game of Ender.
It's not just a game. Already we have
not a
conflict with the tagline and the name of the movie.
You can't steal things other people have already said, Phil.
I was
Yes, we
going
can.
to give credit where credit was due. It is from, that was, by the way, movies.com wrote on why you should go see Ender's Game, and that was one of the reasons. Anyway, let's start with general thoughts. Obviously a rich history. I mean, it's almost been 30 years since the book came out to when this came out. It's been dubbed the impossible movie to make. Yeah, we have this movie. So, we'll kind of obviously compare it to the book. There's a few of us who haven't read the book. There's half of us who have read the book, so we'll have a nice little comparison on that. But all in all, we'll try to treat the movie as a standalone.
Okay, well, I mean, I'll give my overall thoughts.
Oh, and lastly, if you're new to the
Fine, cut me off.
Lastly, if you're new to the podcast, I have to say this. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the movie in depth. So if you're joining us for the first time as a fan, know that obviously spoiler filled. So just go see the movie now and then come back to us after.
There we go. So my overall thoughts were I read this book probably about 10 years ago, thought I remembered it, went and saw the movie. I had not remembered the book. I was still shocked. So I went back and last night I started rereading. I will give it a thumbs up. I really liked it. I went into this movie really kind of thinking about my childhood and thinking about being younger and so I didn't go in with like, this has to be a Captain Phillips drama. I went in wanting to have fun, wanting to see this world and be in this whole different reality. So I really liked it.
My turn?
Your
Yes.
turn.
For me, this movie, it's a mixed bag. I read the book. I've read the book a couple of times. I'm a big fan of the book. And yes, I do agree. It's a very difficult adaptation to make for the cinema. I don't think they did a horrible job, although I think that as part of adapting this screenplay, I really thought that they really pared this movie down a lot, where it lost a lot of its heart, its point, its message. For me, it was visually, all the money was up on screen. Gavin Hood's pacing I thought was fine. I just didn't think it had the oomph that the book had. There were changes that happened that I was like, that sort of surprised me because they were very small. And we can talk about that, I guess, a little later because you mentioned something in a conversation previous to this that I didn't know.
Yeah, what he's talking about, as we're talking about, right, the adaptation, that's part of the script writing process. First, I want to talk.
What were your thoughts of the movie?
I treated it as a movie, and for me, I enjoyed it overall. It had a lot of for me, the biggest thing that I looked at it, it was interesting that the book was written almost 30 years ago,
right.
And now to see the kind of incarnation of those ideas and wow, how we're facing a lot of these kind of questions in today's life.
Sure.
and how people that that can play video games can actually go to war, and you know what I mean, and be disattached to that. I mean, for me, the biggest theme was, I mean, here you have adults kind of leading everything, but we're putting the fate of Earth into a child's hand.
Right, but he's not just any child. It's interesting because, again, in the book, there is
He's been groomed for this.
Well, above and beyond that, he is a specially gifted child. He's one of those kids that I'm sure perhaps we bumped into or knew at one point at a time. He's the kind of kid that skips grades. He's the kind of kid that goes into college when he is 12. Yeah. He's thrown in with a bunch of other kids who are gifted as well. And it's about some of the themes of the book is about that isolation of being gifted. And, I didn't think that the movie captured that.
Well, let's talk about that. Orson Scott Card, one of the reasons he said it's unfilmable is because so much of it is in Ender's mind. You know what I mean? And obviously to be a movie, you have to kind of be sort of third person. I mean,
sure.
to whatever level you want to take it. But what? Why do you? I want to talk. I want the question answered. Why was it thought to be unfilmable?
Well, you can look at the history of trying to get this movie done. The gestation period for this movie is about 20 years. Warner Brothers had originally had the rights when they got it, and it was just trying to get a script that was going to capture the tone. A lot of people felt that because you're dealing with kids that were so young, Ender in the book starts off at 6 years old. And I think, too, that makes an important play as to his plight and his journey. And thematically, when you're talking about things like war, isolation, it is just hard when you're doing it in a science fiction playground that sort of kind of is to mirror society in one way, shape, or form. It is very difficult when you're in the mind of a 6-year-old gifted child. You can't easily, you have to make the child empathetic in one way, shape, or form. You are throwing, the book has themes of isolation. They have of pure coming of age, of war, of civil war, and then of treating people kind, of being trained to be a killer. What does that do to the psyche of someone so young? And all of these themes, like, there's a lot going on, and you really trying to pare it down to the perfect screenplay, because, and I'm sure we'll talk about adaptation of book to screenplay. It's really hard to do. You can't jam pack everything into the movie. There were things I thought they could have done better that would have been easy, and we can talk about that. But, like, for example, was it fully understood that Ender, they were living in a time, basically, it's a futuristic world or a futuristic Earth. They've gotten over this war, and it was basically China. You weren't allowed to have more than one child, and Ender Wiggins folks were allowed to have 3. Well, they were allowed to have Ender. They had Ender, but Ender, and you didn't catch this in the movie, was pretty much considered the bastard child in a sense. He was an outsider, and he could have brought shame to his family because he was a third. And in the book, he's referred to often as, you're a third. So that's all hard. Like, if you want to encapsulate everything, you just can't do it. Yeah. It's like people said you can't translate Watchmen into a movie, although I think Zack Snyder did a better job.
I love Watchmen, just putting it out there.
Yeah, me too. But that's why I think it's unfilmable. And that's why it took 20 years in order for it to get seen.
What are your thoughts, Sarah?
I mean, my thoughts, like you mentioned how they had all of these themes in the book. And I think you could write paper after paper after paper on how many different messages you can get from the novel. But I did feel like there was at least 5 themes that rang true to me through this film. Like themes about morality, about using children, about war, about just the ability as humans to think, what makes us human, and the power of children versus adults, losing of innocence. All of that I still felt was there. So I still liked it and still was able to connect and get something from this movie. Although I would agree that not everything's mentioned as it is in the book, that's obvious. I was okay with what they trimmed down and how they kind of rearranged certain scenes to get the same message across. And sometimes they like amped up the volume to make it fit the movie. One example is, for instance, in the book, we kind of get to see Ender. We get the coming of age theme because he fails a little bit at first, or not fails, but it'll take him 3 tries to beat someone and to learn it, and you get that learning curve. Versus in the film, he's often just gets it right away. First try, he succeeds. There's no opportunity to fail, and that's because you have this length of this movie to make it convincing that he can do this.
Yeah, and again, I'll just go back and like I do agree that those themes that you mentioned were in the movie. They just didn't pack the punch for me that, say, the book had. And when you talk about to me in the movie, and even in the book, actually Ender really didn't fail. He rarely ever lost a battle, and in the book you at least saw his ascension into command, where in the movie it was sort of kind of fluffed off. It was, for me, like, you know, people were like looking at little Ender, and then it took a little video prank in class that he did, and then people started hanging with him at the breakfast table, when that really like just a little prank is going to get people to sit at your table. And they didn't show his ascension as like the book. You saw him working to be the best, and the trials
Here's
and conflict.
most people don't know
Also-
how to actually do an adaptation, and I'm going to channel John
Oh.
in this sense.
Yeah.
As a writer, here's the best way to honestly approach an adaptation, because you know we're talking about all these different things of, you know, what wasn't in the book, what was in the movie.
Sure.
You read the book once, and then you put it away, never again to look at it. That is how you should write an adaptation, only because then you know you're basing it off, you're taking those best moments and what resonated with you
Right.
first and foremost when you read that book, and then from there write it.
Mm-hmm.
That is the way, you know, I've heard a lot of writers say is a good adaptation.
Sure.
Because again, now as soon as you get into like, okay, well now we got to get this from the book and this, then it starts to get you know, you're not being faithful to the book and you're watering down the movie.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
well,
don't forget, it went through a lot of studio, you know, executive hands. So
Yeah.
you have a ton of people reading this, asking for changes, you know. And again, to me, a question should have been at some point, like, is it really worth like all this time, like 20 years to make an adaptation? That's a long time to get in. And then it got put into Turnaround. Odd Lot Entertainment picked it up. Summit was meant to distribute, and you know, finding they had directors come and go, and then they finally got Gavin Hood, and it's just, that's a long time. And you're right, doing an adaptation, I think as movie fans, I know if I'm going to go see a movie that's going to be an adaptation, I know I'm expecting changes. I'm expecting it. Girl with the Dragon Tattoo had changes, both the Swedish version and the American version. You know, The Godfather has some changes. Jaws has some changes.
They all have to have at least some element of change.
Absolutely.
But I want to talk about the scene that you brought up, because you mentioned when he types in the computer, takes over control. We do lose the fact that he's the one who breaks through the system to do that. But what we do gain from that, and how he gains friendship and loyalty, is because his comment comes in defense of someone who is unable to defend themselves, who's standing in front of the house.
Oh,
and
I understand that.
So although they twisted it, at least to me, they gave us something.
Yeah,
They
didn't
gave us
to
some
me, they
motivation
just didn't give us
for them. Or, for instance, in one of his initial fights, how he goes and he uses the body part to attack instead of just kicking him on the ground with just his feet. He goes and they expanded that, and they brought in his connection that he has to these other creatures, and they added these little elements that I thought were appropriate and helpful to the movie.
Yeah, I just didn't think there were enough.
Well, let's
That's
not,
all.
you know, Gavin Hood actually did write the screenplay.
Yeah.
And he's credited as the sole, you know, writer, apart from it being based on Orson Scott Card. And he doesn't really have a lot of writing credits to his
Sure.
name. So, you know, Dimitri, how did that come about? Why him?
Well, I mean, number one, I mean, he's an Academy Award winning director. He did Tsotsi. He won the Academy Award for Foreign Language Film. And in 2006, he went on to direct Wolverine. He also won an award for a screenplay that he had written some years ago. He won some like fellowship kind of an award. So I think that Gavin Hood was available. I think probably, you know, I hate to say this, but he was available. Price was right. They needed to get somebody who had talent and who could shoot an action sequence. And, you know, listen, when you got an Academy Award winner, that is good cachet for any movie that you have. So, you know, and I appreciate what he was doing. And he had listen, it was just a tough, it was an uphill battle.
Yeah.
He had read the book like maybe 5 years prior. And so again, the movie making process was there. And, you know, he had to figure out what to pare down, what to do, how to make this compressed. And he had to pick one straight through line of a story, which I completely understand. You know, and then he also had cast to work with. You know, he had to, you and I were talking, to me, one of the most fascinating aspects of the making of this movie was, you know, when they cast Asa Butterfield to come in, I'm sure they were looking at the idea to cast him as they saw Hugo. I'm sure, because if you see Hugo and you're thinking Ender, wow, that's perfect. But they didn't anticipate the hormones kicking in so quickly, and that kid was growing really fast. So much so that their workaround was they filmed the movie in sequence.
Which is an actor's dream. Film knows that I love things
Well,
that are
but
sequence.
it doesn't happen often.
I know.
But they did it because by the end of production, the kid had shot over 2 inches. So I think that's smart. It's smart filmmaking. You know, and I do think that Gavin Hood, you know, I think that for what they wanted to do, he brings that cred. And he did do X-Men Wolverine, you know, he did X-Men Origins Wolverine. So, and it's not like he's unfamiliar with how to make a movie or how to write a movie. So I think that he was the best man for the job, and he got it. And I think he did. Look, his pacing was fine. The movie looked great. I felt, and he did a really good job. There were some conceptual things that, you know, the battle room.
Well,
Like-
let's talk about direction in a little
Sure.
bit. Sarah, you want to give us the full rundown of what exactly was missing from the movie that was in the book?
Oh, every detail. I feel like
Not every, just
I mean, this is the way I look at it. I just want to accept the movie for the themes that I got and what I took away from it and what I'm happy with. And to me, this gets a lot into like the actors and how each of, especially the adult supporting roles, each motivated some message or thought process. To me, this book and this movie is about, there's a difference in, Orson Scott even said this in one of his introductions. There's a difference about like creating a world by dreaming about it,
Right,
and creating a world by thinking about it. In this movie, these themes make you think. It's so above our circumstances. Everything's so heightened. They're at the brink of this war, and to see how all of the adults function and the way they've altered their thinking really impacted me. And like, so it was important to have actors like Ben Kingsley and Viola Davis, and their characters really supported me and the messages they brought. So when you saw Viola Davis, who played Major Gwen Anderson, have the debate between how far you can really push a child and what it is to destroy them and then have to go back and heal them, watching her deal with those messages was great. Watching Harrison Ford, he's this gruff man, seeing him just go the complete opposite route where this is a winning game, and to see him change from saying like, Ender, it depends on what your motivation is, to just at the end being it's all about winning, it's all about the end result. And to see that change and to see how you grow from, for me, it's like initially you like him, and then by the end you just realize that living life that way makes you just immoral. And so for me, I don't want to compare every difference between the movie and the book, because then it would make me unhappy.
fair enough. Well, there was a huge difference where basically the movie, for me, it's almost as if the movie ends right before the third act of the book.
right.
where because they go back to Earth and all the politics of that.
Yeah, I mean that's missing, and I'll talk a little bit about. I want to talk a little bit about the Colonel Graff character. I didn't find that he changed at all. I mean, in fact, if anything, from book to screen, they softened that character up because in the book, that character is an asshole. I mean, he is really not a good guy. You start to not like him the day he pulls Ender from his parents, which again in the book I felt was more impactful than in the movie. But as Harrison Ford is purposely putting this kid through the ringer, like time and time again.
But he has a belief in him.
No, he has a belief in wanting to win the war. His whole thing is about, he has a belief that this kid is the one that's going to win our war. So, but what he puts little Ender Wiggin through, even Ender realizes that the guy's an asshole. And he even has a conversation with him saying, look, I'll do what I'm told, but, there's going to be a point. And yeah, I mean, his character was definitely softened up for the movie, the way I looked at it. Going back to, I do want to bring this up because we talk about Gavin Hood and his writing. I did find, he won the Diane Thomas Screenwriting Award for a script called A Reasonable Man, and you had people on the, jury judging this thing like Steven Spielberg and Michael Douglas. So, that's why he was probably given the task of, he was probably excited. Hey, you want me to, I can do this. And I love that. I love that attitude of, I can do this. And he tackled something that, it's a lose-lose situation, but he went ahead and he tackled it with a lot of verve. And I appreciate that in a filmmaker. It's just when you're doing it, you talked about the politics. There was a whole side thing in the book about, here's another thing, like his sister, like Ender's sister, Valentine, and the brother play a big part in the book, but their parts have become so minimal in the movie that it just made me wonder why he even had them. They cut out the whole Civil War part that's going on Earth while he's up in battle school. I get that, but again, if you're looking for a franchise, what happens with the brother and sister carries through the rest of the series. And they were really sort of kind of almost written out of the movie. We talk about the end, where you talk about, you talked about the end, and I'm assuming you're talking about the speaker for the dead.
Yeah.
Is that the part you're talking about? Which in the book is a really big deal. Like they cut out the whole part where Ender actually writes a book called Speaker for the Dead, because he wants people to see that, we may have won the war, but if we're going to be doing this, we have to know the people that we're going to war against. And we have to have a sympathy. They need a speaker. And this book gained traction on Earth. And it was a really major part, and it was a really major theme that, had they at least alluded to it in one way, shape, or form, it would have made the ending in the movie a little bit more relevant, because the movie just sort of kind of goes off and ends. Like, and you don't understand. I didn't get necessarily. You're right. It had an end point, but then it went on, where he's carrying the egg and all that stuff. So, again,
I'll give him. I want to kind of move into his direction. But I do want to say, I mean, especially in today's day and age, it's very rare to, especially for, not that this is a franchise film yet, but for these caliber movies, for a director to also write it. I mean, very rare. Christopher Nolan, Coen brothers, obviously the dad, but you know what I mean? But
sure.
for this large scale, usually you have a separate screenwriter, and then, okay, here, you're going to direct. But let's talk about his actual direction of the movie.
Sure.
I thought visually, obviously, fantastic.
Yeah.
But what are the things that stood out for you guys, whether visually or anything, through his direction?
Do you want to go first on this? Or do you want
Okay. Yeah. No. Listen. Visually, I thought. Okay. Number one, some of the shots where they had like the space shuttle rocket ship blasting off into space. I thought that looks awesome. He did visually that looked fantastic. Battle School, I liked what they did to changing the room and putting it in the glass bubble, so to speak, so that it did emulate, in the sense, space. But I think mostly for me it went when he went to command school, and they were doing those games with the little doctor, and like his number one, the combination of his direction and the sound effects. I saw it in IMAX. It was awesome. It looked great. Visually, I think he nailed the movie, and he was able to work those kind of ship special effects. Yeah, he brought it to a good level. He brought it to a great level. So yeah, I had no problem with the way he made the movie look and or feel. He got some emotion out of Little Ender. What you need to empathize with somebody who's virtually being turned into a robot and being stripped of humanity. And I think Gavin Hood. Yeah, I think his direction was fine for this movie. I think he did a really good job.
I'd have to say, like, some of my favorite scenes or like direction points where his focus is when it was just Ender, for instance, Ender like playing the mind game in his bunk bed and depicting, like, first that's partially on Butterfield, but the images of just him watching his face as he played, for instance, the mind game was one of my favorites. I did like the games, especially the tactical one where they basically used the rope to do the semi-gravitational pull.
Sure.
All of that I really liked. I also liked the cube. For me, this is a little bit nitpicky, and it's probably, and this is going to come from the fact that we just watched both Captain Phillips and Gravity. There were certain points where I just wanted everything to feel a little bit more cramped, a little bit more tight. That was just me personally, and I think that's just coming from what we just saw. But at the same time, I loved all the big spectrum stuff. So I liked watching the footage of the original attack that was filmed, or how they did all of that, and how they kind of added this sci-fi video game, all of this kind of piled on. I liked all of that aspect and that vision.
Well, I'm gonna debate you on the cram thing. I mean, this is a school design where Captain Phillips was a nightmare for the captain. Gravity was a disaster for that. You know what I mean? This was designed to be a school to habitate people in large amounts and to be conducive to education for whatever you want. You call that education, good or bad, whatever. But so,
I guess it's just in my mind. I'm like, you put everyone in bunk beds, you put 8 people in the room, and I just want to see them a little bit forced together a little more.
Fair enough.
That's just me.
You brought up a really good point, and this is of no fault of anybody, because nobody could have known what Gravity was going to do and become the movie that it is. I think that coming out after Gravity didn't help Ender's Game much at all. Had they come out before Gravity and we had seen the zero gravity scenes, would have been, you sort of kind of know that they're using wires and harnesses or something. But after watching Gravity, at least to me, it became way more evident that they were using harnesses and wires, and some of the kids even sort of kind of looked uncomfortable hanging there. And again, that's of nobody's fault. You couldn't have known the visual masterpiece that was Gravity.
I mean, zero gravity is such an interesting concept.
Sure.
And when you saw it with Gravity, it was in this very dire, one person is being pulled by the gravity, and the lack of gravity almost causes her demise, her death about 100 times. Whereas in Ender's Game, it's a tool. It's a tool.
He used it as a tool. Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
So I think that your adrenaline builds when you're watching someone use it in these death-defying circumstances versus when he's using it in a game.
Yeah, but I'll take it a step further. But whatever he learned in the battle room, for those battles, he never used practically in the end anyways.
Kind of the one where he does the layers and circles and circles and circles of people to get through the gate.
Formation.
Yes, but
Go ahead, Marissa.
Well,
Hi,
You know-
Marissa.
Hi. Demetria, you said that he didn't use those principles he learned in the battle. I have to disagree because he used all those principles here and there, and especially near the end when he's actually at the command school. He's saying formations. He says, no, forget about this, and he knows the end result that he wants. So he uses little things here and there, and he knows the tools. He knows that he has time, like how long it takes to shoot whatever.
Yeah, but you
his
can't.
gun and stuff. But he took those small principles here and there, be like, oh, I had this amount of time to recharge. I had this amount of time to take a shot.
Right, but he was dealing with people, and now he's a fleet admiral dealing with big ships. So it's to me the practical. It's interesting. And again, I'll say in the book, the battle room sequences were well because they were written. It was way more clear to what was going on at battle school and in the battle room, and the whatever Ender was employing for his strategy, so to speak, was in more detail again in the book, and I had a better sense as to who was fighting who. Where in the movie, it was just kids, a lot of them, and they were just playing laser tag, flying around. To me, the very first time I read Ender's Game, the book, the concept that always stuck with me, and I even watching Gravity, I think they even used it, this thing like up is down and down is up.
Yeah.
There's no, and that's it's so obvious, but you never think of it. And then when it comes out, it's like, well, of course, that is very obvious. And I liked the sort of kind of capture the flag feel. And again, I'll go into, in the book, Ender rises to ascension because of his strategy and lack of formation. Nobody could figure out what he was doing. And the book takes you through those details. I thought that when they were in the battle room, as great as the scenes looked, you just never had that sense of like really what's going on here as much.
I think,
And it would have been nice to see him win more, because like when he gets into Dragon Army or Salamander Army and he's being put down, but he goes up in ranks, you're actually seeing him like he's winning these games. And in the movie, they sort of kind of gloss over. They have the chart, and it's like, oh, Dragon Army goes up here. Oh, Dragon Army,
I will agree with you on this one, especially because, I mean, the book was inspired by his main vision was the battle room. That's
Yeah.
how this whole story got created, was because he created that.
Yeah.
And then it expanded. So in the book, it is such a feature, and that is how he gets his coming of
Yeah.
age. And in the movie, it's added entertainment, if that makes sense.
True.
Those scenes are the action where you see it to see action, where you get to get your blood boiling a little bit.
Right.
But it's not a catalyst for seeing Ender grow. You see more of
Right.
his personal growth. And for instance, I'm going to mention it again, the mind game or things like that, where when he's dealing with people who are bullying him, or when he's having confrontations with people who are at a higher degree than he is. That's where you see him change, him grow. The battle room is more fun, entertainment. Character growth happens in the one-on-one conversations.
Sure.
So I would agree with you on that.
And he made, Gavin Hood even, he said, listen, this movie comes down to two things: battle room, command school. Like those are in the book, to his mind.
Yeah.
That's what he narrowed it down to. Those two have to be those are, in a sense, the set pieces of the book to him anyways. So, and he accomplished that. I mean, that's what he focused his time on a lot. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, visually, I really liked it. It just, everything was colorful, right? At first, they follow the yellow, then as he gets, now the green, things like that, and I really, I thought it was very, very bright for being a space movie, and I liked that aspect of it, because it almost showed an innocence, you know what I mean? Again, these are kids, quote unquote, playing a game, but as we know, it's not a game. Yeah, and I like that aspect.
I would say throughout the film also, the one shot that occurred a couple times that I felt very interesting, and maybe it was a reflection on the up being down or something, maybe it was that, was we kept getting an angle coming from either straight below or straight above.
Yeah, and then they would turn it.
Then it would turn it.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so that was very interesting, and it made you think. I'm not sure if it was supposed to make me think or if it pulled me out.
And I think that was a strategy. You know, part of it was I
Up is
believe
down.
up is I think part of it was to, you know, they allowed these images to kind of be there and to allow the movie to kind of play out, and even though you're watching Ender, you know, you're kind of a version of Ender where you're trying to figure out his strategy and figure out
Right.
what's happening and how does this all fit. So, but I also now I want to
Well,
move on. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I'm just like, but I'm also specifically talking about those shots that weren't when he was playing games. So like when they removed the oh my goodness, what's the name for it again, guys? The
Monitor.
Monitor.
The
Thank
monitor.
you. When they removed the monitor from the second he's lying down on the surgical table, and you're getting the angle straight up of him in the headrest, or when he's laying in the
Right.
bunk, and you get Sergeant Dapp going straight over his head and it's looking straight up at him.
Right.
Like those were shots that weren't even in battle type instances. They were completely removed and they're still using that shot. So I
Right.
thought that was interesting.
I thought so too.
So, and I do have, since we were talking about, just one thing, I apologize, but I think it's important to note, because since we talk about adaptation and Gavin Hood writing, Gavin Hood has he does have a great quote where he says, "The book is the book, and it should be, and it's always going to be the book." And there's so much in that book, and the movie is the movie, and they're two separate things. I don't in any way want to suggest to anyone that our movie can replace the book, which that's a smart thing for him to say. I like that. It can't. But they're two separate mediums trying to look at and doing the best they can with their different tools. I can do things the book can't do, and the book can do things that I can't do, which is a
Yes.
very logical approach to,
Yeah.
when you're doing something. And to your point, you read the book once and then you figure out what you're going to write. So,
You find the heart of the story in each thing.
Right.
And I do think in Ender's Game they had a true heart to this story, and that's why. Ooh,
I don't know.
that
what
was a lot. I don't know what that was. We're
I don't
falling
know.
apart over here.
We'll call that the bell to move on to
call that-
casting. All right, so we've talked about Butterfield. Great. We spoke of Hugo, but he's also in The Boy with the Striped Pajamas,
Mm-hmm.
which fantastic movie. I mean, very dark, but great portrayal.
He's a good actor.
He is.
He really is.
You
And-
have to hand it to him. You do. I mean, I'm going to stick more to the Hugo and Ender's Game for this. But he's having to deal with so much all the time. It's like not there or added in later. And
Right.
he's very young.
Yeah.
And especially for Ender's Game, to be told you're going to put in oscillation, be told that you're the smartest kid in the world, to deal with all of that, plus imagine it all because none of it's really there in front of you,
Right.
and to go and to still have people respect you and endear you. It's a challenge of the character and it's a challenge for the actor.
Yeah.
And I thought he did a really good job.
Yeah. And go ahead, Marissa. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, we also know Asa from Merlin as well. He played Mordred. But the good thing, because yes, Ender in the book, he started as a kid. He was 6, but Ender in the movie is obviously technically the same age, and we see him progress in rank, but not in age.
Right.
And I think I kind of like the idea that they kept to an older version of Ender, whereas a kid version, because it made us, the audience, understand his emotional. He's old enough to comprehend everything that's going on and have the emotional capability to feel, even though there's a lot of violence in all of his actions.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it would have been hard to pick a 6-year-old or 8-year-old or 9-year-old, somebody who had the physicality of somebody that age, and you might have had to use at the very least 2 actors to go through that progression. To me, that's one of those things that's a compression. That is one of those things that, as a person who read the book going to the movie, I buy it. I mean, you can't quibble over that. So yeah, I think they picked the right kid. It was just funny. I don't think they were expecting his hormones to kick in. like so quick. I mean, that kid grew a ton, and he's definitely, if you look at him at Hugo or the boy in the striped pajamas, he's not the same looking kid. I mean, he's tall. And again, I don't blame the casting. You can't foresee this happening the way that it did. But in the book, one of the things that makes Ender so you sympathize with him is because he is diminutive. He's much smaller than most anybody else in his school. So that's why he does have to use his intellect, and that's his greatest weapon. But you sympathize with whatever cruelty and abuse that he's got to suffer through. Where Asa Butterfield, that's another thing too. I felt in the movie Ender was a little cocky, where in the book he wasn't cocky at all. Like, he actually mouthed off to Dap, and in the book he didn't. Like, he just kept quiet, pretty much did what he was told, and the only way he could win is by winning, is strategizing and winning these battles. And that was an interesting choice to make him a little cocky.
You said that he's cocky to Dap, but in the book, Dap is more nurturing than he is portrayed in the movie.
Yes. Yeah,
so I can understand why Ender in the movie would be a little bit more resilient to Dap.
Also, I think that what triggers that reaction is that he does have to say a lot of his thoughts out loud.
Sure.
A lot of his rationalizations for being quiet or for saying this, we need to be able to hear. So when you actually hear some of those things, like his questioning, well, if I have a legitimate question, I should be able to say it. It does come off as a little like, hey, who are you talking to?
Yeah.
But we need it or else we would have no idea.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest, obviously, challenge, as we talked about in the screenwriting, was to externalize a lot of these things. I think that was one of the strategies.
What did you think about the casting? What did you think about Asa Butterfield?
I thought he did a great job. I've liked him since Boy in the Striped Pajamas. I'm not familiar with Merlin.
Merlin's so good,
I'm not familiar with Merlin either.
So. I'm with you, Marissa. Also, some other people I think we should talk about. So we get Haley Steinfeld, who did True Grit in this. What did you guys think about their kind of relationship between Ender and Petra, compared to movie, compared to film? I thought, for me, the reason
By the way, this is the True Grit girl.
Yes, it is.
That's what she will be known as.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
no, not by me, but that's what she's known as.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you guys? I felt like they had this kind of little romance going on, this romantic twist, and to me it was interesting because obviously Ender has so much connection to Valentine and his sisterly love, but then he also develops this other female companion, and this one seemed to have a little bit more chemistry. And I was like, wait, are they trying to age him even more? Is he not supposed to be 12? Is he supposed to be 14?
In the book, there was suggestion that Petra in the book sort of kind of, when she's in Salamander Army, and when he gets thrown into Salamander Army, Petra's sort of kind of the one that takes him under her wing, and she trains him how to shoot more, and they train together, but they build a bond in the book. And in the movie, I know that they were trying to go for some semblance of a relationship. Again, for me, it didn't necessarily work, because to me it was forced in the movie, because Petra wasn't in Dragon Army, and I just felt that it was a forced way to put those two together, where the book was a little bit more organic. So when you get to the end, she helps nurture Ender after those battles.
See, exactly. It's like I pictured her more as his substitute for Valentine, almost as like a sisterly, nurturely bond from the book. And then when I was watching this, I was a little almost confused, because they brought them closer together in age. Right. They did develop this type of relationship, and for someone who he could have been 6 years old,
right.
It was a little interesting to me, and I was just like, maybe I read the book wrong, maybe I felt that wrong there, or
in the book too, if you remember, Valentine came with him. Valentine went up to command school with him as well. Like, he asked her, and actually it was Graf that asked her to go. But, so they made those changes. But I agree with you. I think they were forcing quote unquote forcing a relationship when it wasn't actually necessary. And why not bring Valentine up, like to be that nurturing
Especially
person?
when you've casted Abigail Breslin, who's been in so
Absolutely.
much, and she's so wonderful. I will say, just speaking about her, this was one of her first movies where I was like, wow, she's really grown
She grew up.
up.
She grew up.
I was like, she's definitely not Little Miss Sunshine Girl again. She
No.
is like
She
a
grew up.
woman.
Uh-huh.
She is, and that was shocking to me.
Yeah.
And she looks beautiful.
Yeah,
so
she looked.
that's
Yeah,
just-
no, she did. They're both. I mean, between
Mm-hmm.
Haley and Abigail, they were they were really good.
They have-
Again, I wish the character was explored more because
Mm-hmm.
Abigail or Valentine Wiggin, throughout the entire book, is Ender's lifeline.
Mm-hmm.
She is the tether to his humanity and to his sympathy and his empathy. It's from her. It's from that love that they have as brother and sister that, he is able to maintain a bit of his humanity through all the torture and the trials and tribulations that he's going through. And yet, again, in the book, even the Valentine character sort of goes through changes as well. But, how about you, Marissa? What are your thoughts on our two fine
Yes.
actresses?
First of all, I thought each female character was great. Abigail, yes, she has grown up. I don't dislike her acting. She's a great actress. I didn't really see her as, I didn't think it was believable as her as Valentine being the sister, because they just look so different. And I know siblings, a lot of siblings, look different, but they were so drastically different. I didn't see Abigail as a just physically as a sister, but the acting was there, and she was the the foundation for Ender's humanity, and then also with Petra, I liked her. She was fun. She had that rough side that you don't mess with her, because she has proven herself amongst other men or other boys per se, and she has her strengths, and then so she was a nice female counterpart to Ender.
Phil, do you want to talk about this? Do you want to talk about the adults in our cast?
I was going to talk about Harrison Ford in the trailers. He was featured heavily.
Heavily.
And obviously, okay, the movie's about Ender, not about Colonel Graff. But it's funny to me how I've been a huge Harrison Ford fan, and again, I just love when he sort of does these type of things, and I thought he did a great job.
Harrison Ford has just, to me, I watch him and he was being so mean, but he still makes me smile because he has such he's such an interesting presence on screen, and I really do enjoy watching him, acting wise, and who carried themes across and all of that wise. I would still have to give it to Viola specifically. I really loved her playing Major Anderson. Some of her reaction shots,
Sure.
you could just really see her struggling with this dilemma of what to do with these kids and how to protect them and also how to fuel them and how to understand them. I loved watching her. Ben Kingsley is also one of my favorite actors. I found it was very interesting that for the adults, besides Harrison Ford, I'm not really positive about his training, a lot of them have classical-based training. So Ben Kingsley and who else? It was guys. Noso Anozie, who played Sergeant Dapp.
Sure.
Both trained in London. Both
Right.
pretty much have done a lot of Shakespeare. I thought you could really see that in Sergeant Dapp, especially in his entrance speech.
Yeah.
His commanding voice. That was, to me, you could just tell from that how he was trained. And then Ben Kingsley, I love him. This is me being so nitpicky that it's horrible. I thought that his accent sounded very South African instead of Maori, and I mean, I could be wrong. Phil knows I lived in New Zealand for a little bit, so I've been around them and around their face tattoos, so I kind of knew everything that's coming there. So a little nitpicky because I was just like, this seems a little inaccurate, but I like him. I wish they'd had more focus on him though.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
their
Mazer,
training.
Yeah, Mazer Rack. Yeah, again, it just comes to paring down. personally, Ben Kingsley to me, like if you just let's talk just recent work.
Mm-hmm.
I liked him more in Iron Man 3. I thought he just had a hoot with the role that he had in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
In this movie, he wasn't. You're right. He wasn't in the movie enough for me to care, so to speak. He was in the movie like literally the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes of the movie or so.
Yeah.
And he was fine, but he was just
Do yourself
And his
go
best
see Sexy
scene-
Beast.
he's
But
amazing
for the
in Sexy
fans,
Beast.
for the fans.
Yeah, no,
Sexy Beast. My
I
favorite
agree.
scene with him is his entrance, where he's sitting on the floor on the cave-in.
That was great.
That
That was so. Well, for me, because I haven't read the book, that was unexpected. I'm like, oh wow, there's this interesting, mysterious man sitting on my floor staring at me. That was very alarming to me, but it was effective.
It was a good moment. It was a really good moment in the film.
Yeah. It's a great moment in the book as well. And that was like almost shot for shot, right off the pages. So, I thought he was fine.
What about Bonzo? Let's talk Bonzo. Because
Bonzo.
he's in the book, obviously that's a very pivotal thing, and obviously it's pivotal in the movie as well. I thought interesting, but to pick him, he was a little snottish, little.
He's also
kid.
from the Disney Channel.
Yeah.
Is that what he's from?
Well, see, I recognized him as much as I love Disney and Disneyland, and I don't watch the Disney Channel all that much, but he was in a movie earlier this year called The Kings of Summer.
Oh, yes, you're right.
And
he was great.
his character is quirky, to say the least, because his character plays upon his physical looks.
Yeah.
Bonzo in the book, there's even a passage that Ender even says, like, wow, this Bonzo is a very striking character. Like, his eyes, I can understand why people would follow him. And
I want to punch
Moises
him.
Arias, well, I didn't find him to be, because of his physicality, I didn't find him to be as threatening or impeding or overbearing as that character was in the book.
Well, I
For
think,
me,
Go ahead.
sorry. Well, for me, it was like I felt, although I do think they actually should have focused on his brother Peter more, they needed a different, someone who held power through violence, but with a different look.
Right.
So that's why they got him, and it was interesting because I did see Kings of Summer, and I have watched some of his Disney shows, and he does play these very extreme characters who the Disney one is much more comic, all about jokes about his height, his look. In Kings of Summer, it's also he has kind of an isolated weirdness.
Sure.
And in this, he uses his body and his physicality, but he twitches it to his advantage.
Yeah, because of his looks, I just didn't find him imposing. And it could have been because I saw him like dancing around in Kings of Summer, and I couldn't get that out of my head. And I was like, wow, why didn't you find... This is no critique of the actor at all. I just find somebody who's imposing. You got to find a bully like Ender's brother, like that bully at school at the very beginning, who is really going to be a threat. I never looked at him as a threat too much because of his physical.
He reminded me of an alternate version of Ender, and that's what I liked about it. It was that he doesn't seem like a threat, and so therefore, again, this. Given the wrong strategy, this is what Ender could end up like, and he could be hostile and things like that, and not fulfill his destiny, whatever you want to call it.
Great point, because that is exactly why they put Ender in Salamander Army.
Yeah,
is for exactly what you said. So, yeah, but again, I just wish that they had somebody.
I liked him. I liked him.
I liked him too, just because I felt that it gave him a different enemy, and when you have. Kind of, or not enemy, but an obstacle.
I just didn't find him threatening. With his ears, he just looked goofy to me. No offense.
That's because Dimitri knows.
But I wanted to punch him.
This is because Dimitri knows he could just be like, smush.
I wanted to punch him. Well, you want to beat that character to death in the book as well.
I did.
Yeah, you want to punch him. He's an ass. He's not a good person.
Yeah.
Not a good person.
Shit.
He is a little shit. Can we talk about?
So you weren't sad when he got hurt?
No.
You didn't get hurt. And again, I'm gonna take umbrage. I will take umbrage with that scene since you said when he got hurt. In the book, okay, so there's a fight scene. There are two big physical fight scenes that happen both in the book and the movie. The first one takes place at Ender's school, and he's being bullied, and Ender fights back and really does some damage to the kid. And that kid was imposing. He sends the kid to the hospital. And then our second big physical fight is when Ender has to face Bonzo. And it happens in a scene in the shower. And what I liked about the scene is, number one, Ender was strategizing while the other guy's talking. And you saw Ender with the soap. He's like greasing himself up. He put the steam on, you know, and again, in the book, it's such a great scene because you are going from Ender's mind. It's like, okay, this is how I can, you know, I'm not going to avoid violence here. I have to figure out the best way to get out of it. Now, in the movie, it's almost by accident that Bonzo gets taken out. He has Ender against the corner. Ender pushes him back, and he goes back and he slips, falls.
Oh, definitely. I would say it's completely by accident.
Yeah, in the book, it's no accident. In the book, Ender rears up, does a slide. He punches him in the junk pretty much to the point, like, and we find out later, he kills him. Like, Ender physically beat the crap out of him. And I was wondering why they made that change, because again, it just shows it, you know, because there is a big reveal that it leads up to, that those two kids that Ender fought, he didn't just put them in the hospital, they died.
I guess
and that's a big impact. And I know it's a reveal in the movie as well, but you know, why change that fight scene? You know, I was just curious, and I'll never know, but any suggestions?
The way that I viewed it is just that it relates to kind of where it's a foreshadowing of how he ends up, where almost this accident occurs that ends in this horrific tragedy, and it's how he doesn't want to be that person. He doesn't want to be his brother, to be responsible for all these violence, to be responsible for all these deaths. And so to me, it was just like a mini version of his end war.
Right, but
like,
to do that, he would have had to, instead of Bonzo going down by accident, it would have made more impact had it gone down. He physically beat him.
Well, I guess for me, it's like he had that moment when he twists his arm and he says, I could break your arm.
Right.
And then he goes, but I'm going to let you go. He tries to be merciful.
Right.
And then you get the accident. So
but
to me, it's like
accident.
he had already, yes, because to me, he had already established power. He had established power in, like, one, burning him, to getting him by the arm, holding that control. That to me was his powerful moment. That to me was showing that he could win.
But it wasn't.
It was also how Ender reacted to his actions afterwards. Yes, they didn't really touch upon the fact that both of those boys that he beat up died, but we still showed the audience that he felt for it. He immediately remorses afterwards because he's crying, and he still retains that humanity that we're so worried that he's going to eventually lose.
I understand.
So I think that's what they were trying to point.
But that was in the book as well. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, his sympathy is showcased in the book in that same way, because, but it adds more sympathy if he actually really did. If the kid didn't die because he tripped over a bar of soap, as opposed to him physically beating him to death, and that lingers with Ender. I would say that would linger with you more, other than somebody just slipping, falling, hitting your head on a curb. It was a change that I just couldn't figure out why, because they have all the other things that you've mentioned. All that stuff was in the book. So it was just an interesting choice to me. That's all. I just wanted to throw it under the table. What did you think
of that decision?
Yeah.
They don't want to make him a villain.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what's this movie rated? PG-13?
Yeah, PG-13.
That's, you get into that, it becomes, you know what I mean? It's a tough message. You know what I mean? For a PG-13 movie, not that it would skyrocket to R, but, like, there's certain choices that, and again, you spoke of that the studio may have stepped in and made some changes. I think that to me sounds like a studio change.
Like,
could be.
Don't have him kill a kid on purpose. It's very.
Yeah, it's certainly not a traditional, especially in America, type thing that you would give your protagonist to kill off just children. You know, you don't do
Hunger Games. You know,
yeah,
I mean,
you
we've
do
come
it in
a long way.
You do it in a certain way, and I think that's certainly why. But you know, while we're on the subject of kind of scene study, Sarah, I know
You want to talk about exact scenes? now?
well, yeah, I want what are some other scenes that that you want to discuss in depth?
Personally, I think we should talk a little bit about the relationship between Harrison Ford and Viola Davis,
Okay.
and just about how that's changed and how that's interpreted by the book, and kind of the differences in the opportunity that they see or in our position to see with Ender.
Sure.
And I really liked the images and the conversations we got between them, because for me, you couldn't really figure out who was the perfect, who had more of a moral center, because they both are going through with these deeds for their jobs, for the good of the world. But I thought a lot of their scenes together, for one-on-one scenes, were very powerful and moving and moved the plot. So I think those were some of my favorite.
Yeah, I
couples.
mean, I agree. And in the book, these conversations start off a chapter, and they're almost non sequitur. Like they almost come out of like there's no clear setting. There's no, conversations are happening behind
There's
the
like
scenes.
blips of
Right.
information.
They're just,
It's
a
like
great way
you're
to
kind of
put it.
getting like a feed, like boom.
Absolutely, they are. They're blips of information, and I think Gavin Hood, in adapting, I think yes, he felt that those conversations were important, and he found a way to intelligently bring it into the movie. And you're right, they move the movie. They are in a sense they're our Greek chorus because they're having these conversations about the morality of what they're doing. As it's affecting our characters, so yeah, I thought that
That was one of my favorite
aspect of
additions in
adaptation.
changing and like
I
how they
agree.
use that as a tool,
I
not
agree.
just a little snippet.
Agree.
So those were some, and the acting in them I thought was great. I got so many wonderful reaction
Yeah.
shots and emotional changes. Also, I mean, we talked about it a little bit already, but I was going to bring up the battle scenes and the competitions and how, to me, it's always impressive to make battles different. I mean, in this one, they're in the same space, and to change it and to give them the one-on-one, the learning, the training, and then the ganging up and all, but still maintaining that they're getting victory every time, but keeping that great was one of my favorite aspects. Personally, if I had to pick a battle to be my favorite, I would say the first one where he plays dead and ends up with guns in both hands. And
Sure.
is doing the spinning rotation, just with the ability to shoot everyone.
Don't know why. Well, I do know why, but it was very John Woo. You know, he's floating around in slow mo with the guns ablazing. The imagery in that scene was
With this
great.
huge
Yeah,
grin,
yeah,
and
it
how
was
they captured
awesome.
it, that it was
great.
There was a childlike happiness
Yeah.
in this winning, and
Yeah.
in composition to him immobilizing everyone, but having
Absolutely.
this impish
Yeah.
grin. To me, it was a great shot, great moment,
Yeah.
extremely memorable. Did you guys have favorite battle scenes or
You
battle
probab-
room scenes?
I actually didn't have a favorite. I mean, in terms of Battlefield, I actually liked the introduction to the Battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because I thought that was clever, the way it was done, and you know, it served so many different purposes. Ender, here you go in.
That's very true. That's very true. How they use it as such a tool to explain all the rules instead of,
Right.
because I mean, in the book, I think it's given to you pretty quickly what it is in one chapter, a description at least.
Well,
of-
in the book. It starts off from the rocket ship. It starts off on the trip to
Yeah.
the battle school, and they're in the thing, and Ender that comes
and
up
they
with that
explain,
gun.
and
That's
they
who he goes.
explain the
We're in
guns, and they
zero G.
explain that.
And Graf says, "What's going on here?" And he says, "You know, well, up is down, down is up," and
And then we
they
get to-
explain the rules right there.
Yeah, and in that, it's like it's told to you, and then we got
Correct.
to find it out in a scene of action,
Right.
And through movement, I thought was a good
Yeah.
choice, making that a good scene. Finally, I think we should talk about the inclusion of the big battles. I mean, the final war game, however you want to phrase this, and also the inclusion of the
Graduation.
footage. Graduation. This is how I envision my graduation happening. No, and also the footage that they created of the original war, and contrasting those, you get the original one amongst the clouds, all of this light, beautiful, you almost feel like you're in heaven in this like
Yeah.
demise, and then towards the end where I felt like it was just black with blips of red, except for the blue ships. To see those polarized and put next to each other, but both these huge battles against this with the same two teams.
Sure.
I liked how they visually did that. I mean, there's not too much acting in them besides movement, because it's just gun battles and strategy. But to make those different and I think resonate, I really liked them.
Am I the only one when they were showing the old war footage? Was I the only one that channeled Independence Day? Like when Major Rackman,
Oh, totally.
like I was just like, all I kept on thinking was Randy Quaid's face in full close up going, "I'm back," and then he flies his ship right up into the ship, and I'm like going, "Hey, it's Independence Day."
My question
But-
is, did you guys find it interesting how many times they showed that footage?
A lot,
Yeah.
but it was
like-
done that way in the book too. In the
Mhm.
book, Ender rewatches that footage because he's the one that finally questions and going, "There's something missing here. Like, I'm not getting all the feeds. Why can't I get the feeds?" He goes, "Because it doesn't make sense the way these are clearly he pieces together that this is all edited together." And he pieces like we learn that it's a propaganda piece,
Yes.
and so that's what, that I get. Yeah, because we did see that footage, the
Yeah.
same footage over and over again.
Because to me that was very interesting because you don't see that in film normally. You're not
Right.
going to get the same clip of footage. I think it was 4 times
Yeah, it
throughout
was a
one
lot.
film, and it
So-
wasn't short. It wasn't
No.
like 2 seconds. That was a 10-second
Yeah.
clip, and to repeat that over and over, I thought was very interesting and very jarring. And it does key the audience in that there must be something wrong. Because if you're repeating and you're showing someone something, same thing, you're telling them you're supposed to
We're
catch
missing
something
something.
too.
But
Yeah.
I
Like-
think that was they used it well as an exposition, especially the scene when they're actually breaking it down, because we've seen it so many times, but now we're understanding as an audience what is really happening and how Ender's questioning be like, "Oh, you must have seen certain points in the formations. You must have like really put together something in order for you to take out that mothership." And then they use that scene as an exposition of, this is what we have to do in our battle now. We have to take out the mothers to defeat everyone.
The queens, yep.
Right.
Definitely. So
How
I
about
thought-
your favorite scene? If you had one, or 2 or 3?
4,
My
5?
favorites. I really liked the beginning stuff because it kind of set us up, and especially the way they pitted Ender and they forced strategy. Forced him to be strategic. Right, especially hey, here's the last launch, not my fault, and then hey, you isolated me from the whole group.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? So I really like those aspects of it. But for the sake of time, one of the big, I want to forego some of the more technical stuff only because I want to talk about this side of it. With the book, what I like is that military schools are using it as education. So I want to know.
But it was very militaristic because
Yeah.
when we see Ender and the Salamanders, they're marching and having that song that they're singing very military.
And I don't
very
disagree
army.
with you. I want to know, is this movie gonna be like? Could this movie be used in that same way?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Because, in my opinion, you can take a movie like Aliens,
Mhm.
okay? You look at those badass Marines. Like, that to me was what badass Marines, if you're going to depict them in movie, like, that's what they were. We're talking science fiction, and I understand it's Aliens, it's rated R. In this movie, I didn't get so much the sense in the movie as I did in the book as the training went. So that's, for me, I don't, the book, yes, I can sort of see. I don't think Orson Scott Card meant for his book to be viewed that way. But, but I don't think the movie can be viewed as any kind of training for
No.
military,
I don't.
personally.
I would agree with you. I think it's more likely that you're going to get people who are going to jump on the see. This is people showing us that playing video games and watching
Right.
all these films can poison children into needing to go to war and be violent and all this stuff. I think you're gonna get more people saying that. They're gonna be like, we need to use this as a motivational tool to get people to join and work for us or do
Right.
or follow commands. That's how I personally see it. That's also because despite the fact that the truth of this story is that they're training kids to be soldiers
Sure.
Without their knowledge,
without their knowledge,
more or less.
besides that truth, I go through this movie fairly happy and lighthearted, and in like it's training me to like I see like how people think in these dire situations, and it's interesting that one person can say this is the right way, and another person can say, well, where is the line? But overall,
Well,
I'm
here's
like,
what's interesting.
it's
You know, from
enjoyment.
from the larger perspective, right? I can't remember too many movies that depict children as soldiers, apart from Cambodian children with machine guns, which is, you know what I mean?
No, I know.
I
I know exactly.
This is
yeah,
a
sure.
romanticized depiction
Sure.
of kid soldiers.
Yeah.
Yeah, even God, even going back to
Blood Diamond had a bunch of kids with.
Yeah,
But
I
again,
mean-
I'm saying that's
I'm like
a
the only thing I'm
horrible
thinking of is like
depiction
I'm
of it.
thinking about like Hook, where you get all of the Lost
Right.
Boys like being pirates or like fighting the pirates, but they're using like chicken eggs and ketchup, and nothing's doing any real damage.
the only movie that I can think of, because it took place at an academy school and it was a high school, was the movie with Tom Cruise, Sean Penn. It wasn't called Toy Soldiers, but
there was a Toy Soldiers.
there
Yeah,
was a
that
toy,
was-
but that was a
different.
Joe Dante. But do you know the movie I'm
I
talking about?
don't actually.
It had Sean Penn.
Taps.
That's the one. Timothy Hutton, Sean Penn, Tom Cruise. They were all technically they were high school students in a military academy, and they go to war, like against one another and such. It's if you have a chance to find it, I would recommend it. Taps. It's a good movie. The only other movie that I can come close is maybe perhaps the original Red Dawn. But you're right. I mean, we're not seeing,
Yeah.
and if you want to say the Hunger Games, to a degree, but we don't normally see kids,
Romanticized
in this
as
dire
soldiers.
situation.
Yeah.
Well, I don't personally. I don't think they were romanticized. I think the point was saying we're using these. We have to tap into
These
these
people are
gifted
becoming
kids,
tools,
and
not
they're going to be
people.
our tools to win this war, and that's what we're. I don't think there was a. The
Well, I bring it
movie
up because
didn't
it's a
romantic-
point of controversy.
It
and,
is,
and,
yeah.
And
It was when the book came out too.
we teased this earlier at the top, but Dimitri, you were displeased that they changed the name
Right,
of the enemy.
right. In the book, they're known as buggers because of their insect-like appearance, and it was the Bugger War. And yeah, again, I was like, why are you that's just a word. Like, why are you changing that?
Now-
That's in the book.
I'm unfamiliar with this term, but for
I was
according to research, which is good, I guess that means I'm not racist, because according to research that I've done, the reason why that they've changed it is because that means an offensive term to gays. And obviously, with Orson Scott Card's controversy of homosexuality, they weren't going anywhere near that.
And that makes sense in that context. Then I go, okay, I understand. We're going to talk about the controversy a little bit.
Yeah,
Are we?
I mean, that's why I want to talk about. I want to spend some time on that aspect of it, only because I know for us we're fans of the movie and things like that, but we also have to speak to the greater issue of what's going outside of our opinions.
What's going on?
Yeah.
World
Yes.
I'll go last because I have a bunch of thoughts on this. And first and foremost, it sort of sucks that we're sort of kind of forced to have to talk about it, because it really keeps us talking about the main issue, which is we're breaking down a movie. We're not Bill Maher. We're not that show, but it's been forced on everything. So I'll go last, and then we will throw things.
I have
up for
opening
everybody.
statements.
Yeah, opening
Jeez.
statements.
No, I mean, a lot of the themes in the I thought a lot of the themes kind of in the movie were presented to a degree at a cursory level where they didn't fully explore everything, you know. And again, I thought by choice, right? We talked about how, I mean, basically,
you have to cut
in
things
the-
down. You have to
in the
narrow.
book you had you know, they basically were bloggers back then
Exactly.
writing about this, and
Right.
that was kind of, you know, hugely overlooked on purpose. And so, you know, for me, I thought I would have liked to see it a little bit explored more.
Me too.
Um,
Because it's a very important part. It's telling, I agree with you, because it tells you the state of Earth has much bigger problems, is basically what that is telling you. You know, this bugger war, there's even a part in the book, and to an extent the movie, we're not even entirely sure that the buggers are ever coming back, but they want to make sure they never come back. So that's that plight, not of space. But Earth is in a shitstorm. Earth is in the verge of going on a global civil war. And you're right, those two characters.
I mean, they
blogging-
had 3 colonies, right?
yeah.
That kind of mentioned in the movie.
No.
Not really. Right?
No, it was never. It was that was never brought up. Whatsoever.
It's like they were trying to establish, according to the movie, it's like there was one on Earth, and then they tried to make one closer to Earth,
Right.
and then, but that's about as much as you get.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, you know, the good news is overall people are liking this movie.
Yeah.
I would say. I mean, Sarah, in terms of what controversy you've seen with the movie. How do you
Okay, so
stand on it?
speaking to the Civil War and the bloggers and the dynamic that adds, I do think it added to the book. But not having it puts a different message to the movie, because we get these people who aren't really under as much of a threat as they say they are.
Right.
And you even get the hesitation before the battle, and they're like, well, why are they holding back? And the spin that this gives it is that the people in charge of Earth and in charge of the warfare are really turning into the bad guys and are really turning into the criminals. And
Absolutely.
to focus on that is also a huge issue. If it's the fact that you're making not the weakling, but making a victim or making someone who's not hostile into the enemy,
Right.
and being able to change public opinion, or just change at least the actions and the control, and to have certain high up people be able to develop this one opinion and change how everyone thinks, and then also not only change the way that they're thinking and viewed, but to also create a war and to delete an entire species.
Yeah.
That's its own big message.
Sure.
So I do think that the Civil War and all of the bloggers and all the different views, that adds a whole different dynamic, and it's a whole nother story in a way.
It is. I mean, in
But
the book,
without
it
it-
is completely a
yeah.
different story. No, and I agree with you. I mean, on one hand, it's hard to. Again, this just goes back to how we started the show. Is Ender's Game unfilmable? Because it does have so many themes going on, and on one hand, you can sort of understand why they aced it. But to your point, I agree with you, Phil. I mean, it would have been nice to allude. It would have been nice to allude to what was going on Earth for outside of the political ramifications, but for another important reason, because it makes the characters of Valentine and Paul, I believe, Peter, Valentine and Peter's characters have some reason for being. Where in this movie version, that if you took those characters out,
Yeah, you'd still be fine.
it'd still be fine.
It's
And their relevancy to the movie is really diminished. Where in the book they have major relevancy because they are shaping the politic of a planet, and they're kids who are just blogging.
I mean, maybe they're trying to send a message to the people who are watching in the time that we are in now, and maybe it's a critique of our actual society and who has control and who has a voice. And although I do think obviously bloggers have become huge and social media has become huge.
Sure, I mean, I think it's very important today what people can do with a blog.
maybe they're just illustrating that without that. I don't know. I'm trying to play devil's advocate here.
Well, let me also ask you this. This was another interesting trend I'm kind of seeing. The movie was released outside of the U.S. first, and Thor is doing the same thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know. Like, I don't know what that's. Where is the American market used to be heavily important. Now
Maybe it's because we developed so much controversy. People have such harsh opinions. They want to show everyone else first. They can get everyone else to see it, and then they'll come to the U.S. where we'll all nitpick it apart.
I can.
Who knows?
All right, I will do my
Actually,
best to
Dimitri
add to
probably
this. Well, believe it or not, there are some territories that are spectacular indicators to how a movie will perform in the States. London, England being one of those territories. You can open a movie overseas and you'll have if it opens up, believe it or not, if it opens up really well in London, you know that you could potentially open up pretty well in the States. Another main reason why you're opening it up overseas, piracy. You're going to cut down on the piracy because a lot of our piracy does come from overseas. So, that's another reason why you would open a big movie like that. But, the other one is it's a good indicator. Like if you're opening to $150 million overseas, that says that you're potentially going to have some nice numbers here in the States, and it'll mesh with the tracking. So that's one reason why. But the other main reason is, piracy.
See, there you go. Those are the actual reasons.
I mean,
it's
interesting to me how the business in that way is changing.
It all the time. I
know there's still other stuff we could definitely talk about and things like that, and we're gonna get so much not hate mail for it, but you know what? I welcome it because you know what? I want to start a community of fans here,
Sure.
and I want to get us talking.
Can we talk about like the main controversy that this whole thing is? Because it angers me to a really big extent because it affects more than just two groups, more than just two people. Orson Scott Card, first and foremost, he's a Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
Are we all familiar with his anti-gay marriage and anti-gay rights that he's come out with? I mean, it's been in the press.
I know he's very much against it.
He's very much against it. But, I'm not, first and foremost, I don't agree with Mr. Card's views and opinions on this. I just want to get that out in the clear. We should also note that he is a Mormon. So are we surprised at his views and opinions that he has? I mean, we had a guy who almost was president who was running as a Mormon as well. Their views and opinions are pretty staunch. Mm-hmm. So he made comments dating back as far as 1990. Okay. And it's funny, I found this on Vulture. They actually have a timeline. But he made some anti-gay marriage, anti-gay comments in 1990. And nobody really said boo at the time. I mean, I wasn't paying attention. It wasn't until Summit picked up the movie, it was greenlit ago, and this group, that's it. We've got an author. What can we do against an author? We can boycott books, big deal. A movie's big publicity. Mm-hmm. We can get the best publicity. So they go and attack Orson Scott Card, and they go ahead and they start a campaign to boycott the movie. And this is while the movie is in production, and it starts to gain steam. It is a very political hot button in our country, unfortunately, but it is. And for the people, here's what sucks to me. The people who are making this movie, they don't have an agenda. They're just trying to make a movie. They're trying to entertain audiences. Gavin Hood doesn't have an agenda. The book doesn't have an anti-gay agenda. The people who are just trying to make a buck and trying to be creative and artists, they didn't have an agenda, but yet they have to deal with this while they're making this movie. They have to make a change in the script, a small change, because they're dealing with this. So I really feel bad for the production because they're just trying to make the best possible movie they can. So now you're making your movie, this groundswell is building, and then I really feel sorry for the studio. The studio has to deal with this, and when you're trying to market a movie to open up to number one or to get big numbers in, and then all of a sudden your marketing has to stall and stop and play deflection mode and say, the movie's not about this. it hinders their ability to try to market the movie in the best, most creative way. You know, you talk about Harrison Ford is in the marketing a lot. You know, they had to, like, of course you want to put Harrison Ford, he's a big star, but you had to change your marketing a lot, and all because of what I think, you know, this silly controversy. And the group that was doing this, and I don't you know, I don't have their name, I'll find it, but I just feel really bad, like, because this group, I understand what they were doing and gay rights, and that's great, but they didn't take into account as to who else this was going to affect. Orson Scott Card was paid. He was paid for the rights of this movie years ago. Like we said, this movie has been in the works for years. So then you go to the studio. They're trying to go to Comic-Con. People are protesting Comic-Con. The studio is forced to make a statement that we're not anti-gay, gay marriage, lesbian, transgender. A studio shouldn't have to be put on the spot.
Especially if it's something that they didn't do.
They didn't do. And again,
they have no connection to these statements, to these beliefs.
Right.
I mean, I completely agree with
Yeah,
you.
and
You can't blame all these people who put so much work
I
and so much
know.
love in something,
And-
and it has one string tying it to someone you don't agree with,
Right.
and you're going to try and affect all of their
Right.
lives.
And I'm not going to forgive Orson Scott Card because he should have just shut up, but he kept on throwing fuel into the fire. And it's like, again, as a studio head, as a marketing head, and I'm going to even go into distribution, you just got to throw your hands up in the air and go, dude, just knock it off. Because can we agree that Ender's Game is not about gay rights?
Yeah, it has
Right?
nothing to do.
Nothing to do with it, right? So now you got to market it. You got to distribute the movie. You got to get this movie into theaters. Lest we all not forget about the tragedy that took place in Colorado. So this already has theater chains on edge. Now, I don't know if any of this happened, but I can only guess. I'll take an educated guess that with this controversy, a theater chain has to be thinking about potential picketers coming to their theater, something causing attention that they don't need in already a world in which tragedy can happen. So, you know, shame on the group, because Lionsgate Summit, all they were trying to do is get a movie out for the movie-going audience. They didn't create a horribly bad movie. And again, this is regardless of whether I liked it or not. I think the controversy, it's sad to me, because as a fan, as a moviegoer, and working for the studios, I understand what it takes to get a movie out. And this was just silly. And it didn't need to be as blown up. No studio should be backed into a corner where they have to say, hey, look at us, we're giving a charity to the, Gay Lesbian Alliance, or doing this. You shouldn't have to while you're just
Especially
trying to
when it
release
has
a
no
movie.
effect on the actual movie.
It has
or
no
the
effect.
content, or what people are
Absolutely.
seeing.
You know,
there's no
boycott
connection
books
there.
or something. But I think that both parties were sort of kind of at fault. I think you can't see whether or not it affected the box office gross.
Yeah.
But that's Dimitri's soapbox. I'll get off. I just felt that I really felt bad for them because they were thrown into a position that was unnecessary, and it was too bad. A lot of people, it affected a lot of people's work when it shouldn't have. So,
All right. Well, fans, I want you to know that you have your own soapbox. You can comment, rate, subscribe, to all these anatomy of movies. We want to hear your opinion. We love discussing movies, but again, we're here as a community, and that involves you, not just us. So spread the word. Let us know what you guys are thinking, and we will read it. We do.
We do.
There you go.
And I love everybody. I just want to make sure.
I love everybody.
I love
too.
everybody.
I just want everyone to be happy.
I want everybody to be happy and watch Anatomy of a Movie. I'll love you even more if you do that.
And we've got a lot of good movies coming up.
And I think All War should become laser tag because it seems like more fun.
Yeah, just freeze a person.
There you go. We'll be discussing About Time, Thor. What else we got coming up? American Hustle, certainly. We're going to do some Thanksgiving type stuff. We're going to do some holiday type stuff. We're almost in February. We got Oscars.
Crazy.
We got a roller coaster here.
And we want everybody to be on board. We want your opinions, but because we are coming up to a very exciting time of year.
Yeah, check us out, anatomyofmovie.com, for all the movies that we've reviewed thus far. Check out the schedule page for what we will be reviewing. And I say review, but we're not really reviewing. We're more discussing and dissecting.
Absolutely. Having a good time.
Talking.
And Dimitri, where can fans reach you?
At Anatomy of a Movie.
There you go.
They can find me here, comment to me here, and go into the website, YouTube,
Yeah.
and iTunes. I still can't get over the fact that I'm on iTunes.
There
You can download. Yeah, this is crazy.
And you can find Sarah at another network called AfterBuzz TV, where she recaps
Or
very.
Phil can tell you all for me, right? I was like,
Go ahead if you want.
no, go right ahead. I'll just sit here.
There you go. Check out Boardwalk Empire. Get caught up on Teen Wolf. She did that show, and she's doing.
I like HBO. HBO is
she
probably
loves.
my favorite network.
Follow Marissa at Serafini TV.
That's right.
It used to be Marissa Movies, but now it's Serafini TV. Ironically.
Ironic.
I had Marissa Movies. I was forced to change it, and look at that.
I know. But we'll see you guys here next for another episode.
Hey, before we go out, one big happy birthday for Phil. Happy
you.
birthday,
Happy
Sunday,
birthday.
please, Sunday.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
You get into like, okay, well, now we got to get this from the book and this, then it starts to get water. You're not being faithful to the book, and you're watering down the movie.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
well,
don't forget, it went through a lot of studio, executive hands. So you have a ton of people reading this, asking for changes, and again, to me, a question should have been at some point, like, is it really worth like all this time, like 20 years to make an adaptation? That's a long time to get in. And then it got put into Turnaround. Odd Lot Entertainment picked it up. Summit was meant to distribute, and finding they had directors come and go, and then they finally got Gavin Hood, and that's a long time. And you're right, doing an adaptation, I think as movie fans, I know if I'm going to go see a movie that's going to be an adaptation, I know I'm expecting changes. I'm expecting it. Girl with the Dragon Tattoo had changes, both the Swedish version and the American version. The Godfather has some changes. Jaws has some changes.
They all have to have at least some element of change.
Absolutely.
But I want to talk about the scene that you brought up, because you mentioned when he types in the computer, takes over control. We do lose the fact that he's the one who breaks through the system to do that. Sure. But what we do gain from that, and how he gains friendship and loyalty, is because his comment comes in defense of someone who is unable to defend themselves, who's standing in front of the house.
Oh, I understand that.
So although they twisted it, at least to me, they gave us something.
Yeah,
they gave us some
they just
motivation
didn't give us
for them. Or, for instance, in one of his initial fights, how he goes and he uses the body part to attack instead of just kicking him on the ground with just his feet. He goes and they expanded that, and they brought in his connection that he has to these other creatures, and they added these little elements that I thought were appropriate and helpful to the movie.
Yeah, I just didn't think there were enough.
Well, it's not, Gavin Hood actually did write the screenplay.
Yeah.
And he's credited as the sole, writer, apart from it being based on Orson Scott Card. And he doesn't really have a lot of writing credits to his name. So, Dimitri, how did that come about? Why him?
Well, I mean, number one, he's an Academy Award winning director. He did Tsotsi. He won the Academy Award for Foreign Language Film. And in 2006, he went on to direct Wolverine. He also won an award for a screenplay that he had written some years ago. He won some like fellowship kind of an award. So I think that Gavin Hood was available. I think probably, I hate to say this, but he was available. Price was right. They needed to get somebody who had talent and who could shoot an action sequence. And, listen, when you got an Academy Award winner, that is good cachet for any movie that you have. So,
You want to take it. But why do you? I want to talk. I want the question answered. Why was it thought to be unfilmable?
Well, it's you can look at the history of trying to get this movie done. The gestation period for this movie is about 20 years. Warner Brothers had originally had the rights when they got it, and it was just trying to get a script that was going to capture the tone. A lot of people felt that because you're dealing with kids that were so young, Ender in the book starts off at 6 years old, and I think too that makes an important play as to his plight and his journey. And thematically, when you're talking about things like war, isolation, it is just hard when you're doing it in a science fiction playground that sort of kind of is to mirror society in one way, shape, or form. It is very difficult when you're in the mind of a 6-year-old gifted child. You can't easily, you have to make the child empathetic in one way, shape, or form. You are throwing the book has themes of isolation. They have of pure coming of age, of war, of civil war, and then of treating people kind, of being trained to be a killer. What does that do to the psyche of someone so young? And all of these themes, like, there's a lot going on, and you really trying to pare it down to the perfect screenplay, because, and I'm sure we'll talk about adaptation of book to screenplay. It's really hard to do. You can't jam pack everything into the movie. There were things I thought they could have done better that would have been easy, and we can talk about that. But, like, for example, was it fully understood that Ender, they were living in a time, basically, it's a futuristic world or a futuristic Earth. They've gotten over this war, and it was basically China. Mm-hmm. You weren't allowed to have more than one child, and Ender Wiggins folks were allowed to have 3. Well, they were allowed to have Ender. They had Ender, but Ender, and you didn't catch this in the movie, was pretty much considered the bastard child in a sense. He was an outsider, and he could have brought shame to his family because he was a third. And in the book, he's referred to often as "you're a third." So that's all hard. Like, if you want to encapsulate everything, you just can't do it. Yeah. It's like people said you can't translate Watchmen into a movie, although I think Zack Snyder did a better job.
I love Watchmen, just putting it out there.
Yeah, me too. But that's why I think it's unfilmable. And that's
I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Anatomy of a Movie. It's quite a tongue twister only for me. I am your host, Phil Svitek, joined alongside Dimitri Panos.
Hello, everybody.
And Sarah Stratton.
Hi, everybody. Guess what? It's Phil's birthday weekend. So everyone say, happy birthday, Phil.
Sweet happy birthday.
Glad you've dated this podcast. And of course, in the booth, we have Marissa Serafini.
Hello, everyone.
And John Comerford is not here with us today. And of course, the big question on your minds, although I don't know why since you've downloaded it, is what movie are we talking about? Of course, Ender's Game.
Woohoo!
Ender's Game. It's
not just the game of Ender.
It's not just a game. Already we have conflict with the tagline and the name of the movie.
You can't steal things other people have already said, Phil.
I was going to give credit where credit was due. It is from, that was, by the way, movies.com wrote on why you should go see Ender's Game, and that was one of the reasons. Anyway, let's start with general thoughts. Obviously a rich history. I mean, it's almost been 30 years since the book came out to when this came out. It's been dubbed the impossible movie to make. Yeah, we have this movie. So we'll kind of obviously compare it to the book. There's a few of us who haven't read the book. There's half of us who have read the book, so we'll have a nice little comparison on that. But all in all, we'll try to treat the movie as a standalone.
Okay, well, I mean, I'll give my overall thoughts.
Oh, and lastly, if you're new to the
Fine, cut me off.
Lastly, if you're new to the podcast, I have to say this. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the movie in depth. So if you're joining us for the first time as a fan, know that obviously spoiler filled. So just go see the movie now and then come back to us after.
There we go. So my overall thoughts were, I read this book probably about 10 years ago. Thought I remembered it. Went and saw the movie. I had not remembered the book. I was still shocked. So I went back, and last night I started rereading. I will give it a thumbs up. I really liked it. I went into this movie really kind of thinking about my childhood and thinking about being younger, and so I didn't go in with like, this has to be a Captain Phillips drama. I went in wanting to have fun.
That's why it took 20 years in order for it to get seen.
What are your thoughts, Sarah?
I mean, my thoughts, like you mentioned how they had all of these themes in the book. And I think you could write paper after paper after paper on how many different messages you can get from the novel. But I did feel like there was at least 5 themes that rang true to me through this film. Like themes about morality, about using children, about war, about just the ability as humans to think, what makes us human, and the power of children versus adults, losing of innocence. All of that I still felt was there. So I still liked it and still was able to connect and get something from this movie. Although I would agree that not everything's mentioned as it is in the book, that's obvious. I was okay with what they trimmed down and how they kind of rearranged certain scenes to get the same message across. And sometimes they like amped up the volume to make it fit the movie. One example is, for instance, in the book, we kind of get to see Ender. We get the coming of age theme because he fails a little bit at first, or not fails, but it'll take him 3 tries to beat someone and to learn it, and you get that learning curve. Versus in the film, he's often just gets it right away. First try, he succeeds. There's no opportunity to fail, and that's because you have this length of this movie to make it convincing that he can do this.
Yeah, and again, I'll just go back and I do agree that those themes that you mentioned were in the movie. They just didn't pack the punch for me that, say, the book had. And when you talk about, to me, in the movie, and even in the book, actually Ender really didn't fail. He rarely ever lost a battle. And in the book, you at least saw his ascension into command, where in the movie, it was sort of kind of fluffed off. It was, for me, like, people were like looking at little Ender, and then it took a little video prank in class that he did, and then people started hanging with him at the breakfast table. When that really, like, just a little prank is going to get people to sit at your table, and they didn't show his ascension as, like, the book, you saw him working to be the best. And the trials
here's
and conflict.
Most people don't know how to actually do an adaptation, and I'm going to channel John in this sense. As a writer, here's the best way to honestly approach an adaptation, because we're talking about all these different things of what wasn't in the book, what was in the movie.
Sure.
You read the book once, and then you put it away, never again to look at it. That is how you should write an adaptation, only because then you're basing it off, you're taking those best moments and what resonated with you first and foremost when you read that book, and then from there write it.
Mm-hmm.
That is the way I've heard a lot of writers say is a good adaptation.
Sure.
Because again, now as soon as
wanting to see this world and be in this whole different reality, so I really liked it.
My turn?
Your
Yes.
turn.
For me, this movie, it's a mixed bag. It's, I've read the book a couple of times. I'm a big fan of the book. And yes, I do agree. It's a very difficult adaptation to make for the cinema. I don't think they did a horrible job, although I think that as part of adapting this screenplay, I really thought that they really pared this movie down a lot where it lost a lot of its heart, its point, its message. For me, it was visually, all the money was up on screen. Gavin Hood's pacing I thought was fine. I just didn't think it had the oomph that the book had. There were changes that happened that I was like, that sort of surprised me because they were very small, and we can talk about that I guess a little later because you mentioned something in a conversation previous to this that I didn't know.
Yeah, what he's talking about, as we're talking about, right, the adaptation, that's part of the script writing process. First, I want to talk.
What were your thoughts of the movie?
I treated it as a movie, and for me, I enjoyed it overall. It had a lot of for me, the biggest thing that I looked at it, it was interesting that the book was written almost 30 years ago, and now to see the kind of incarnation of those ideas, and wow, how we're facing a lot of these kind of questions in today's life.
Sure.
And how people that can play video games can actually go to war, and you know what I mean, and be disattached to that. I mean, for me, the biggest theme was, here you have adults kind of leading everything, but we're putting the fate of Earth into a child's hand.
Right, but he's not just any child. It's interesting because again in the book, he's
been groomed for this.
Well, above and beyond that, he is a specially gifted child. He's one of those kids that I'm sure perhaps we bumped into or knew at one point at a time. He's the kind of kid that skips grades. He's the kind of kid that goes into college when he is 12. Yeah. He's thrown in with a bunch of other kids who are gifted as well. And it's about some of the themes of the book is about that isolation of being gifted. And, I didn't think that the movie captured that.
Well, let's talk about that. Orson Scott Card, one of the reasons he said it's unfilmable is because so much of it is in Ender's mind. You know what I mean? And obviously to be a movie, you have to kind of be sort of third person. Sure. to whatever level.